Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I am so excited for this video. We are going to make two double slider cards and I'm going to show you two ways to put them together that you can use for any card you make. They're really pretty easy and they have such a great pop. Watch this. You pull one end and the other one slides out too. This one is maybe my favorite. I don't know. I can't decide. This is the Insta-Snap die set. It's new from Trinity Stamps. And I'm going to go ahead and assemble the camera really just based on the photo from the packaging. This comes together really quickly. If you didn't want to make a double slider, you can make a shape card with this super easily. There's a grid on my mat that is for an A2 card. This camera is the same width is that grid. So it's 4¼ inches. It is a little shorter than a portrait A2, but that's okay. There's a little extra room in the envelope, not a big deal. I'm just gluing pieces together, right? This isn't anything fancy. There's a couple of circle layers. I cut that white circle out twice, essentially, once out of white and then a second time out of black glossy cardstock. So I would have a circle that fits on the inside perfectly. I also added this splash with the same black glossy cardstock. I love that Trinity has glossy cardstock in 3 different colors. A little bit of specialty cardstock just for these little details makes it stretch a long way, but it adds a wonderful accent and something that just makes your card a little bit extra special. I'm not using it today, but there's also a mini stamp set and a coordinating die for that called Picture This that has like we just click, say cheese, happy Valentine's Day. I'm no photographer, but I can picture us together. It has a stamp of a similar camera and of a photo coming out of it. And so there's lots of options depending on what kind of crafter you are. This is the mini heart swirl die and I cut it out of some white glitter cardstock and I'm just gonna run that right diagonally across my camera like a little accent. Then I can just flip it over and trim off the excess with my scissors. It's really quick and easy and I like it as just a little extra something on my camera. I have cut out the Say Cheese that comes in the die set from some black glossy cardstock again, but I put rip and stick sheet on the back and then I just put it on the end of my pickup stick to let me kind of hover it around the card and decide where I want it. The Say is going to go on the front, but the cheese is on the inside, my friends. Here's a look at what our mechanism is going to look like. I need a base piece, 2 rectangles, and some scrap acetate. So I have cut my base piece to 3¼ by 3¼ inches square. The idea here is that we're learning a method. You just need this to be smaller than your card. I like 1/2 inch on either side of my rectangle pieces. I cut my rectangle pieces to the same width as the photo that's going to come out of my camera. Okay, and I held the longer one over the top of it and I just made tick marks on the top and bottom. I'm going to cut into those with my scissors and I'm just going to hollow out a little sliver. I'm not measuring this, but it's maybe 1/8 inch. I just need to make sure that the acetate isn't going to slide all the way off of this base. Okay, so I'm going to rip this off and show you something. This piece here has acetate that wraps all the way around the outside. I use recycled packaging for this. Anytime I get a stamp set where I'm not saving the packaging, I still save the plastic for things like this. I have cut it to be the same width as my rectangles. I'm going to add some ripstick 1/4 inch tape onto one end. Then I'm going to wrap it around my base. I am not wrapping super tightly. I need this to have just a little bit of wiggle room so that it slides well. I will use my little pokey tool to remove that release paper and then I'm pulling this up and over and then I'm going to kind of lay it in there, right? I'm not trying to make this as tight as possible. Then I will test it. I'm just moving it with my fingers and making sure it moves freely. If it didn't at this point, I could try to adjust that. But mine moves great. So I'm going to trim off the excess carefully with my scissors. I am putting a little black Sharpie line on there just to help you see where the tape is. The tape does not want to round the bend. Okay, it gets kind of caught up there. So that's going to matter later. For the big reveal on my double slider, we're going to use the Grater Gratest stamp set, spelled G-R-A-T-E. It's so funny. I colored them off camera just to save us some time. There's already 2 interactive cards on here, and then I'll cut them out with the dies. Here, I cut a white piece of cardstock that's the same size as my gray cardstock. I gave you the measurements. I've kind of written them down on that white piece, but really, I just held it up to my piece of white cardstock and took it to my trimmer. Then I'm going to add the gray piece over top of the white one. I'm going to put the cheese on this one, and I have the word cheese that I've cut out of black glossy cardstock with rip and stick sheet. And when I picked up the die, all the letters stayed in there. So I'm just going to put the die centered where I want that word, and I'll use my pokey tool, my pickup stick, to poke the holes through the die, and it will lay those letters down like stickers, and I'm done. I'm not fiddling around with placement. I'm not worried about it being straight. It's perfect. I used a really, really pale blue Ohuhu alcohol marker to create a little ground for my cheese. And I'm going to set him right on top of there. And that's the photo that's going to pop up out of the top of my card. I am putting rip and stick tape again onto my acetate, and I'm covering up that black Sharpie line from before. All right, I want to put it in the same place. The bottom of my photo is going to attach to that rip and stick tape. I have moved my acetate so that the tape is down towards the bottom of my card. Now I'm adjusting that base, that white cardstock, to make sure that the photo will be inside of the Insta-Snap die, that camera die, when I go to assemble everything. Okay, I'm temporarily taping it there so it doesn't move, just to help me visually. I've removed the release paper. Again, look, that line is at the bottom, the tape is at the bottom. I'm going to line up my photo so that it's inside of the camera, and I will set it into that rip and stick tape. Okay, then I can pick this up. I'm going to flip it over and put it right inside those traced lines, and then this piece, the same width as the photo, I want to make a little tick mark just below the base of the card, and then I will trim it off right at that tick mark. I want the word pull hanging out, but that's it. So I've put everything inside my MISTI. I temporarily adhered my grater. It says you're the greatest, and pull, right? And I will stamp those into place. So now I'm going to assemble the other piece. If I have one piece of ripstick tape at the bottom, the other goes at the top, okay? So here I am, I've got the ripstick tape at the very top position, and I am going to add this piece of cardstock in there. It's upside down right now, but see how this makes a little Z? That Z is important. The stamping, the images, those should both be facing the same direction. To assemble my card, I'm using 1mm foam, and I'm putting that just over the top of that traced pencil line, but not far enough in that it's going to touch the acetate. You see that? I'm double checking. I haven't removed the release paper yet. I'm just making sure nothing's going to get stuck. I will remove the backing paper, and then I can put the base into position. I'm making sure that my cheese photo isn't getting stuck in the adhesive, okay? Then I will layer up another layer of that foam tape over top. I did that on both sides so that nothing's going to catch as we're pulling this in and out of the card. I'm adding just a little bit of wet glue on top of the foam so I have some wiggle room, and then I will line up the two pieces, and I just use the edges of the card to make sure that everything is in the same position, and then I'll press it flat. We have one more piece to add. I'm going to pull the bottom pull tab so you can see them both pop out as that acetate is sort of rotating around our base, but I can add my grater onto the bottom. I wanted to wait until the end to make sure I got my positioning right so you could see as much of it as possible, but that finishes up card number 1. It's this cute little camera, this bright sunny yellow. You pull it and then it says cheese and you're the greatest. And I just think that it's so funny. This card works the same way, but we're going to use donuts. You're a glazing. And it's also going to open all the way up. This is the new circle shape card. You can turn it into a donut, a bagel, or a piece of pizza. And I imagine many more things. And then these are the tiny donut dippers. And I have cut all of those pieces out, including the donut holes, which are so funny to me. I'm going to begin by assembling my die cut pieces. There is this wonderful like swirly business that can go on top of the glaze for your mini donuts. And I am going to add those with wet glue, and then I'll just come in with my little scissors, and there's 4 quick little snips and you can cut out the glaze that would have gone over the center of the hole. Honestly, I think this is easier than if it had been like 3 or 4 different little pieces of glaze that you're trying to assemble onto the donut. So huge thanks for that one. And then I'll add it onto donuts that I cut out of some craft cardstock. I did 2 of them with the sort of swirly glaze, and then this one, you can cut the glaze and then you can cut sprinkles into it. And so the glaze on the back will show through as purple sprinkles. It's essentially the same die cut. And so I'm looking for this spot with 3 little bumps, and it's easy enough to find them and line them up, and it's a perfect match. Then I'll add that on top of my other donut base. You certainly could add sprinkles too. There's a couple little options for adding sprinkles. But here I just kept the insides from the mini donuts and put the little frosting on top of them for my glazed donut holes with a little bit of frosting. And then there's this little swirly bit I'm going to add onto the largest one. I want a sentiment on the inside of my card. So this is sprinkles on my donut, and it says you are the sprinkles on my donut. It's huge. The circle shaped card is a 4 1/4 inch circle. And so this really fills the inside of it. There is also a coordinating die that will cut out the sentiment. And then to make the most use of that die material, all of the inside you can cut out as a whole bunch of sprinkles, just a ton of sprinkles all at once. And I adore that. I've cut out some chocolate frosting for my large donut, and I am using the You're A-GLAZE-ing stamp set because it has this swirly glaze frosting that I can add over the top. And I'm going to stamp this with some VersaMark ink, right? I'm going to hit it with my anti-static powder first, then my VersaMark ink. But I wanted some extra sparkle and shine on this card. And so I'm going to bust out a really, really sparkly, shimmery, glittery embossing powder. I'm not a glitter girl. It gets everywhere. But if you stick it in some embossing powder, I do okay. So once I get that on there, I will heat set everything, and you can see as it melts, we keep that shine, but there's also some gloss in there. It's a little bit iridescent, and it just picks up the light beautifully and finishes that off. I went pretty traditional with this donut, but you wouldn't have to, right? Some of my teammates have made it with blue frosting and pink frosting and all kinds of fun things. So be sure to check out the Trinity channel for tons of inspiration using this die set. Then I cut out my ton of sprinkles. I actually used the dies that came in the circle shaped card die set, but it might have been faster to do that with the sprinkles on my donut. So I have cut out 2 additional 4 1/4 inch circles to make our double slider card. I am not cutting out the center of my donut. You can, there's a die for it, but I want to hide the mechanism on the inside and make sure that everything is a surprise. So this is what it's going to look like when we create our mechanism. Essentially, I'm cutting out another 4 1/4 inch circle. This works beautifully with any shape card. And then I like to cut off a 1/2 inch from either side. This gives me flat sides to cut the grooves for our acetate. So once I cut the first side, I will just line up that straight edge on one of the lines from my trimmer, and I'm good to go. I have a piece of acetate that's 2.5 by 3 inches. And then I have a piece of cardstock that's 2.5 inches wide by pretty long. I'm going to trim it down later. I am laying this centered over the top of this craft piece where we trimmed off the top and bottom. And I am just going to cut those tiny little grooves into it. Once again, I'm eyeballing it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody's going to see it. If I had to guess, it's somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch deep. Just enough that the acetate isn't going to slide off the mechanism. And that's it. This works so, so beautifully for shape cards. Here's my strip of acetate. It is the same width as the cardstock pieces that I'm going to use. I put rip and stick sheet on one end, and then I'm going to wrap it over the top, remove the release paper, and then I'm going to pull the bottom up and over. I want it not super tight. Not super loose, but not super tight. And I'll kind of lay that in there. And you can see there's just the tiniest little bit of give, and it slides really easily. I'm using my marker again over top of where the tape is, because we want to make sure when we assemble things that that is all the way at the top or all the way at the bottom. Okay, So if it's on the top here, it's on the bottom on the other side. For one of my pop-out elements, we're going to use acetate, so it looks like the elements are just floating there. So I've added my rip and stick tape over top of my line, which is over top of the original rip and stick tape, okay? And then I'm going to lay my acetate right into that, right? So it's all the way down at the bottom and it will be hidden inside the card. On the other side, I am just sort of taping into place where this other piece is to get the lay of the land. You could skip this part, but this was part of my process, making sure everything would fit. As I have them both extended, I'm figuring out where I want my mini donuts to go. I think I can fit all three as long as I'm okay only seeing part of the third one at the bottom. I'm going to use wet glue to add these to my card base, but certainly you could use double-sided adhesive here, maybe some rip and stick tape if that is easier for you. My acetate is sticking out above this second donut, but I'm not really worried about that. I will trim this down a little bit later just to tidy it up. But as I'm assembling, I'm being really careful to make sure that the donuts are all inside of the acetate from side to side, okay? If they're not, they might catch on the foam tape that's going to put the mechanism together. If they go up much higher than the acetate, then you might see them even when the card is closed. Once I have everything glued on there, I will take my scissors and just trim around these donuts a little bit. So I'm not going to poke anybody. It is a really heavy duty acetate, but then I'm good to go. On the bottom piece, I'm going to add some white cardstock. I just wanted it to help the sentiment pop a little bit more and for my donut holes not to blend into the background. So my craft piece is 2.5 inches wide and this white piece is 2.25 inches wide. So I just get a little bit of that craft on the edges, but then I have as much white as possible. I want to do some stamping on this bottom piece. So I've moved everything to my MISTI and I'm just trying to get my placement right before I go stamping onto this panel. So I'm using the Papercrafting Magic stamp set for the word pull, and I'm going to stick that in the bottom right corner. And then I'm reaching for the You're a Glazing stamp set, and I will use the stamp that says You're a Glazing because it's the best. That's probably why it's named that. I have to go diagonally to make it fit, but actually I really like the aesthetics of it and I'm pretty happy with it. I keep wiggling things around here and I realize that actually I can move that pull up a little bit. So after I stamp these, I am going to trim this piece a little bit shorter so it ends just past that pull stamped sentiment. I'm going to go ahead and add my rip and stick tape to my acetate, and I have my little line from my Sharpie reminding me of where that needs to go, and I can add this piece onto that ripstick tape. Remember, I need my donuts to face the same direction as my stamped sentiment, okay? So while it looked like I was putting it on there backwards, that was important. It's going to create this little Z when I'm done. So here's my mechanism, and I've added 1mm foam on the back because there's very little bulk. And then I've added regular foam tape onto the front because there's more bulk. I have 3 layers of donuts kind of overlapping in places. I added a little wet glue to the foam tape on the back, and I'm going to add that onto my card base. I have a fully functioning opening card base, that circle-shaped card. Cut that out for me and created the score line at the top. For the foam tape on the top, I used the Pear Blossom Press World's Best foam tape because it's repositionable. I don't need to add any glue on top. If it were in the wrong place when I put everything down, I could just pick it up and try again. It's amazing. I can't even. All right, so now I have my 3 little donut holes and I am just arranging those on the bottom here. I've got 2 above my sentiment, 1 below my sentiment, and I'm going to add them with wet glue. I don't really want anything with foam tape sliding in and out of my card because I would have to put even more foam in between there to make sure that things didn't catch. And that will finish up card number 2. I would love to know which of these 2 cards is your favorite and if you will give a double slider card a try. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more inspiration. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.